Hey, and welcome back to the Transition Discovers Learning Series. This video is all about supporting independent living and community engagement. Let's talk about a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, this video is designed to be interactive. That means that you're going to watch and at different points pause the video in order to practice new skills. After each pause, we'll continue on with new content. The time points of these pauses are listed for you in the video description in case you need to start this video over at any point. All practice activities are going to be done within a worksheet that you'll need to download from the course. The video will tell you when and how and what to download. Finally, we recommend pausing the video if you need more time to engage with any of the text content shown. So to reach our learning goals, first we're going to unpack different models of independent living. So who's involved, what's the focus, and we'll use this kind of core knowledge to then build upon that and talk about what evidence-based and effective practices we can use to support independent living and community engagement for young people with disabilities. Okay, so let's break it down. When we think about independent living, our first thoughts might be around making sure that we're including appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals that are related to independent living within the IEPs of transition age youth, and that those goals are developed in collaboration with young people and their families. And while this is definitely important for us to ensure that we're meeting the expectations of Indicator 13 within that SPP APR process, this is really the starting point for our work as we move beyond compliance through a systems approach to supporting young people. So what does that mean? Well, we should really think about supporting independent living skills as a task that requires collaboration between schools, state and local agencies, community partners, which might be service providers, peers, community members, and business owners. In the end, our focus should always be on supporting individual student knowledge and skills, new and ongoing planning or learning experiences, and developing connections between young people, families, and supports in the community. More often, this requires a diverse team of youth, families, and stakeholders working together to link their efforts across schools, agencies, and community partners. Supporting independent living and community engagement is thought of as a collection of different but related areas of focus, each with their own related evidence-based practices for making them happen. That's not to say that practices for one area won't overlap in another and build towards something greater. They do, and we'll talk about that too later on in this video. Within the Transition Discoveries framework, these different areas of focus are called sub-indicators, and they include independent living skill development, which includes young people learning how to manage everyday adult responsibilities for life after high school, planning for future living arrangements, so where they'll explore and prepare for living and housing options after high school, travel and transportation skills that help them to travel independently and safely in their community and beyond, recreation and leisure skills and knowledge so that they can engage in events and clubs and hobbies with their peers, family, and friends in the community, and community-based experiences where young people have opportunities to learn skills in the community to prepare for work, post-secondary education, and being part of the community. We also have access to faith-based experiences where young people have opportunities to engage in different places of worship if they'd like to. We have civic engagement activities where young people develop leadership skills and volunteer to help others and organizations in their community toward a specific cause. And last but certainly not least, we have mental health supports, where young people receive counseling, therapeutic services, and resources that help them to maintain and develop their emotional and psychological well-being. In taking an ecological or systems view of independent living for young people with disabilities, there are three core areas that we should focus on. We begin with, and then continually circle back to, young people building their individual skills for being independent at home, traveling in the community, maybe managing their health or budgets, as well as many other skill areas. We'll talk more specifically about those and more skills, as well as how to support them with specific evidence-based practices in a bit. But first, it's important to understand that supporting these skills, knowledge, and access to learning opportunities doesn't happen in a vacuum. In fact, it happens concurrently with ongoing planning and learning experiences that include both young people and their families taking a leadership role as they work with professionals to develop a plan for where they want to live that aligns with their goals for work, school, recreation, leisure, and civic engagement after high school. This also includes exploring housing options, including the funding and support services that are available to make that happen. It's important to also remember the link between this planning and building individual skills. We should be collaborating with young people and families to figure out what knowledge, skills, and opportunities they need in order to both prepare for living independently and to take on a greater role in planning what that will look like. By connecting young people and their families with services and supports that align with person centered goals and plans around independent living, we extend their access to skill building and planning experiences to include a broad range of new stakeholders beyond the school. Centers for Independent Living can be a major asset in taking this next step. Centers for Independent Living are nonprofits in all 50 states that provide information and referrals to resources such as accessible housing, transportation, employment opportunities, and rosters of persons available in the community who might serve as personal care attendants or interpreters or readers for individuals with low vision and visual impairment, as well as many other services. They also provide and include independent living skills training and support for transitions to independent living options from restrictive settings like institutions and nursing homes. Centers offer systems advocacy to help youth, families, and stakeholders change exclusionary policies, practices, or attitudes towards individuals with disabilities in their community. This might include disability awareness or issues training for businesses, civic groups, churches, schools, community agencies, you name it. Centers also provide individualized, interactive presentations on specific disability issues to these groups. They might also provide technical assistance to businesses or different centers in the community to help them to meet the expectations and requirements of the American with Disabilities Act. This makes sure that the community is accessible and free of barriers for people with disabilities. Centers will also provide peer counseling to build self-advocacy skills and knowledge about supports for young people with disabilities. Centers for Independent Living are run by people with disabilities for people with disabilities, and they're supported by funding through the Rehab Act. And the goal of these centers is to promote a philosophy of independent living. This philosophy is a way of thinking about independent living that's all about consumer control, peer support, self-help, self-determination, and equal access. The goal in the end is to maximize leadership, independence, empowerment, and productivity of individuals with disabilities. And partnering with Centers for Independent Living, young people with disabilities, family members, and transition stakeholders within education or vocational systems gain a huge amount of access to a host of services not traditionally available in schools. Young people and families can actually work directly with a Center for Independent Living, or stakeholders in the school system or agencies may collaborate with the center to provide opportunities to young people. So as you can see, independent living is all about being person-centered, starting as early as possible, ideally while young people are still in high school, and it takes a community effort. Alright, it's time for pause and practice. At this point, you'll want to pause the video, download the video worksheet from Schoology from our online class, and then complete that worksheet. Once you've completed the worksheet, resume the video and we'll continue with new content. Let's change pace now from the components and potential partners of supporting independent living and start focusing on the how-to behind all of this. We'll do this by unpacking part by part the details of an evidence-based approach to implementing a sequence of practices for building independent living skills, planning between youth, families, and stakeholders, and establishing connections between young people and their families to supports in the community. Supporting independent living begins with ongoing person-centered planning sessions between young people, family members, and the stakeholders who are part of their IEP team, which often includes teachers and paraprofessionals, school administrators, school or district transition staff, and related agency staff or providers. The goal of this planning is to support the individual responsibility of young people in creating a detailed plan that identifies their preferences in areas such as recreation, transportation, friendships, health supports, housing, getting a job, family relationships, social activities, the list goes on and on. The planning process must also focus on young people identifying their strengths, needs, and goals that are related to their preferences across these many areas of living independent lives as they define them. In order to make such a plan, young people need to have knowledge about all the potential opportunities across these areas, as well as the steps necessary to achieve or access them. Specifically, stakeholders need to provide them with learning opportunities in school that build both their executive functioning skills, which includes decision making and problem solving, as well as strategies for keeping track of their progress, and specific skills for independent living. These specific skills might include money management, transportation skills, using assistive tools, home skills, and managing their health and wellness. The reality is that it's not always feasible to support learning across all these different areas within schools, and that's why we should turn to our state and local partners to extend learning beyond the school day. In collaborating with Centers for Independent Living and community partners, such as nonprofit advocacy organizations, schools can ensure that young people not only have the opportunity to learn about additional aspects of independent living, such as benefits and support services, but to also gain skills through community based learning experiences with their peers. We can support the 8 sub-indicators of independent living by focusing on these domains. Take a few moments to read the knowledge and skills in each of these areas that young people need to develop in order to reach their independent living goals. These knowledge and skills are considered evidence-based because of a strong body of research and literature that has shown their direct impacts on post-school outcomes. The National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, along with research from leading universities, has shown how developing these skills leads to young people with disabilities living independently in their communities. These skills also positively impact growth in other areas of their lives, including employment and post-secondary education. Take a few moments to read through these different domains of independent living skills. If you need more time to read this content, pause the video now before we move on to the next section. We can support all of these skills that we just learned about through several evidence-based instructional approaches. These approaches can be used in the classroom and during community-based learning experiences. Our first approach is called modeling, and this might involve individuals such as teachers, transition staff, family, and peers acting out the steps of a task or part of a task, how to navigate a social situation, or how to use a specific learning tool or strategy. Modeling is not just about going through the motions. It's also about articulating to young people the inner thought processes that lead to decisions that result in desired outcomes. Our second evidence-based instructional approach is called prompting. This begins with stakeholders breaking down a completed task or goal into its sequence of individual actions. Then, we provide learning experiences for young people to try out each part of this task with room to fail, while we systematically provide them with visual, physical, and verbal cues to support them in achieving each specific behavior required to completing each part of that task. This means that cues or prompts should always be the least intrusive possible and should be faded or modified over time to increase a young person's independence to the highest level possible. These activities should be supplemented with conversations with young people about potential tools and persons who can support their achievement of these tasks. This is particularly important when doing it without any support does not align with the young person's strengths, goals, and needs. We can also use materials and create situations in school or in other structured learning environments that reflect the natural social and physical conditions that young people will experience in various community settings, which might be work, going to school, hanging out with friends. And the goal is to try out parts of a task or work on core skills in a low-risk environment so that young people build their confidence to try them out during community-based learning experiences. Speaking of community-based instruction, this involves learning that takes place in real-world situations and environments. The emphasis is on young people learning and reinforcing skills within the environments they are expected to be performed in. A key aspect of CBI is learning across settings and time periods so that young people build independent living skills that are generalizable to the many different environments they experience in their adult lives. So, who's involved? Well, CBI includes stakeholders, family members, and peers in mentorship roles who provide modeling and prompting as needed. Age-appropriate transition assessment is an important aspect of community-based instruction as you work to measure student growth just like you would in the classroom, and as you work with young people to help them learn about their progress towards their independent living goals. Now that we have a handle on the parts of independent living, the evidence-based practices that we can use to support the knowledge, skills, and access of young people with disabilities, and the process of planning, learning in school, and extending that learning to the community, let's put the entire recipe together. Here we have an example of how transition stakeholders can plan learning opportunities for young people to develop specific independent living skills in a way that aligns with current state academic standards. Embedding learning opportunities to support independent living skills into the curriculum starts off with thinking about the specific skills that we want to support in the classroom. I chose the ability to comprehend and complete apartment rental agreement documents. Next, we look at the state standards that relate to the subject that we want to infuse independent living skill development into. In this example, I chose English language arts because I know that being successful in completing the apartment application process requires specific literacy skills to be developed. I also know that students learning how to comprehend and complete the documentation needed would be an excellent real-world way to teach and support comprehension skills for informational text. So, given this rationale, I chose the ELA standard of determine or clarify the meaning of unknown and multiple meaning words and phrases based upon grade level reading and content, choosing flexibly from a range of strategies and tools. Alright, now for the fun part. Creating learning opportunities to build these independent living skills and these English language skills at the same time. Drawing upon what I now know about evidence-based practices and approaches, I've chosen a mix of modeling and direct instruction, experiential learning, and community-based instruction. In a guided group activity, students can review the features and functions of common housing websites. As the teacher, I could model these skills on a computer and my thought processes, particularly around problem solving within that website in my search. As I go through searching for local apartments in the area, this would be an example of modeling. I could also provide a small group or independent activity where students can work in small groups or alone on computers to search through apartments.com for potential apartments for a fictional young person based upon their post on a fake Instagram profile. Students could look for the key items covered in the Renting 101 tip sheet that contains important features of apartments for rent. Everyone in the class could then join together and share what they found until they agree upon an apartment that fits the young person in the case example. Another learning activity could be peer pairs. First, I might hand out a tip sheet of different core parts and aspects and requirements of a lease agreement and then review them as a class. Then I could have students work together in pairs to fill out the missing parts of an example lease agreement that relates back to the young person in the previous case example. If I wanted to have students extend their learning beyond the classroom, they could sign up for a tour of an apartment building, complete that walkthrough, and ask specific information during the visit about that apartment. They could be given a tip sheet of essential questions to ask and information to get, kind of like a scavenger hunt. Students could attend in small groups, pairs, or as a whole class. They could then write up a paragraph of their findings or present them verbally in class. This could support additional English language arts skills. Alright, it's time for your second and final pause in practice. At this point, you'll want to open up that video worksheet that we've been working on earlier on in this video and complete the question under part 2. Once you've completed the worksheet, upload this document into Schoology.